What's up guys, Matt here with BleepinJeep. In this video I'm going to show you how to properly wrap your exhaust system, including the headers. I'll show you some tips and tricks along the way. We're going to paint them and discuss the pros and cons and the equipment you need. Let's get started. Alright, so we will be wrapping a straight exhaust pipe just to get the technique down, and then after that we're going to be doing a header because that is more of an art form. So let's get the basics down first and then we'll work on this. The first thing that I want to do, since this is used, I'm putting this on a crawler here and it's kind of dirty, so I want to clean everything up and get this ready for paint. Now the reason I'm going to paint my exhaust system first before applying the header wrap is one of the cons of header wrap, and that is it retains moisture. When something retains moisture, it makes rust. So what we want to do is try to keep the rust from occurring. And so for that, I'm going to use a high temperature paint. Now you can choose to do this or not, it's up to you. If you have stainless steel headers, it's not necessary. But for my purposes, I'm going to hit it with some high temp paint before I wrap it. Okay, so a little bit about header wraps. First, you need to know which kind you have. There's a couple different types. One is made by DEI, it's called the titanium, and it's actually made of lava rock threaded into fine fibers. And this one doesn't need to be wet before you apply it. It's got some stretch to it already, and you can apply it dry. A little bit cheaper is fiberglass. Now this stuff comes in multiple colors. This one, just one. And you need to get it damp before you apply it. So we're going to put it in this bucket of water. It doesn't need to be soaked, just moist. And then you're also going to need some of these metal strap ties, like zip ties but made out of metal. Okay, doing straight sections is fairly easy, so that's where we'll start. Typically you want to measure out how much you're going to use, but in this case I have no obstacles. And it's probably going to be a lot, so I'm just going to use the whole roll, and we want to overlap 1/4 inch. So the first thing we need to do is fold this over to get started, because you don't want the edge fraying. So we're going to fold it about like that and get it started. Now on the fiberglass, you want to make sure that you're wearing gloves because obviously it's fiberglass. You don't want that in your skin. And then when I come to an obstacle here, I'm just going to go around it. I'm going to go around that O2 sensor right there. And we're trying to overlap by 1/4 inch. If you overlap more than 1/4 inch, you're going to build too much heat. Try and pull it tight as you go around. Now as you go around corners, it's going to be hard to get that 1/4 inch you want, but just keep it as best you can. 1/4 inch on the outside turn there. Don't want to have any gaps where you can see the pipe. And then remember to pull it tight every wrap. If you have a helper, that would make this much easier to do. Let me show you another little trick while we're here called priming. So you can take this and just loosely wrap it around the pipe, and that way it's a little easier when you do this to pull it tight. So now, when I'm pulling tight over here, there's not as much to pull on. So I can just pull that, wrap, pull, wrap. Should wrap it looser though. There we go. Sometimes that priming though can kind of get frustrating and get in your way, so it's really just a preference how you like to do it. Now once I get to the muffler, it's going to be impossible to make that step up without it being weird, so I'm just going to cut that here with some sharp scissors. Then we're going to do the same thing that we did when we started. We're going to fold it, and then I will have to put a tie on it on this end. It works just like a zip tie. You're just going to slide it through there. Oh, I lost my glove. And then you're going to pull tight. Now let's use our handy dandy tool that we made. We're just going to slip it under there and pull like this. Alright. Now there's going to be a kink right there. We're going to cut it on the other side of that kink, and then we're going to fold it and fold it. Perfect. We'll do another tie right up here where we started. Now since that's a single piece from there all the way to there, you don't really need more ties, but I'll tell you why you should. That is, if you were to have maybe your drive shaft hit this and tear it, or maybe a rock hits it and tears it, then it's going to start unraveling right there. The more ties you have around it, the less it's going to just completely come off. So maybe you'll only get a section missing before you catch it. That's 2 or 3 inches missing rather than a whole 1.5 feet missing. Another benefit of having multiple ties like that is this stuff doesn't last forever. It gets brittle and fragile. In fact, this is the old stuff that I had on here, and I think that's probably 5 years old. So eventually over time it'll just wear on its own and start coming off. That'll help keep it on as long as possible. I'm going to do the same procedure on the muffler here. Some of the benefits of this stuff is it increases your horsepower. It does that by increasing the temperature on the inside, but at the same time it's reducing the temperature on the outside. So it's keeping your engine bay much cooler, and a lot of times you have exhaust pipes running under your floorboards. In this case, the muffler is very close to your feet, and it's going to reduce that temperature as well, so inside the cab temperatures too. Alright, now it's time to do the header, or in this case the exhaust manifold, and this is a bit more of an art form because you have all these different pipes that you have to cover, and you want to make it look good, of course. So I've looked it over, and I think in this case what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here, do this here to here, here to here, and then if you notice, this pipe right here is one single pipe. So then I'll start down here, come all the way to the collector, then I'll go here to here, here to here, and this last pipe, when I come across and it gathers at the collector, then I'll wrap it larger onto this larger collector piece here, and then everything should be covered and good. So how do you get the right length? Obviously you don't want to wrap this through all of these little pipes. So what you do is you can kind of guesstimate. So in this case, this is what I had left over. Let me show you how this is done. You can wrap it around, and of course you're going to overlay about 1/4 inch. So that's one. Let's give us a little extra. So we've got 1, 2, maybe 3 wraps around, and then so you're going to go 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to give myself a little bit extra. There's nothing worse than getting to the end and you don't have enough, especially when you're doing a long run. So in this case I'll just use the whole thing. And remember, you want to fold this over to start, and I'm going to start, what did I say on this one here? Okay. Okay, it's looking good. Now that I've got those 4 wrapped, we're going to do the same thing here. First thing I need to do is measure. Now remember, this is a different diameter pipe here. So let's start, I'll probably end it right about here. 1/4 inch overlay, so 1, 2, 3, 9, 10. So let's say 11, and then we're gonna measure from the larger pipe here. So 11 of those, so 1, 2, 11. And a little bit extra just for fun. Okay, just like the other ones, I'll start right here and I'll work my way around. It's quite difficult right here because it steps up in size, and then you have this loose section in your wrap, so just be careful there. Don't want to have openings and gaps that will get dirt inside them. Any stragglers, just cut those. And I did just barely make this thing long enough. So that goes to show you, always leave yourself more than you think. This little tool makes it so nice, being able to tighten those up. Otherwise, there's no way you'd get that tight. Let me show you another little trick. As you're going around, it tends to fray on the end. And to keep that from happening, I'm just going to take a piece of Gorilla Tape and tape that up good. It's not going to stick well because it's wet, but if it stays on, it should keep that end from fraying too bad. Alright, I'm just going to start over here and work my way around. Now this last wrap is the hardest one, but just take your time, stay patient, and you'll get it done. When you get to the end, of course, just like always, cut that off, fold it over, and we'll tie it off. That looks good, but we're not done yet. Our next optional thing that we can do is paint this with a high temp silicone paint. What that's going to do is to seal all this up, because every time this gets wet, it's going to soak that moisture up. It's also going to soak up oil and, in my case, a lot of mud and dirt. So I want to try to keep that from happening. So I'm going to paint it with a high temp silicone spray paint. But before I do that, I need to dry it out, because remember, it's still wet. So you could put this in your oven, although your wife might be really upset. For larger pieces, what I've come up with is just to take my heat gun, stick it in one end, and that's going to boil off all of the water. Another option would also be to give it a couple of days and just let it dry out on its own. I guess you could douse this in alcohol and set it on fire too, although I don't really recommend that. Let that dry out, and now the paint that we're going to be using is a high temp silicone paint. It has to be very high temp, between 1500 and 2000 degrees. And all the stuff that we use today, I'm going to leave a link down in the description box below. So click that down there if you want to find any of the products that we're using today. I'll leave those below. So what I should mention is that if you're using the titanium stuff, you have to do this in 3 stages. So you have to spray paint it and then heat it, which is going to be on your vehicle. So you have to warm up the vehicle up to operating temperature, then let it cool down, and then spray paint it again, and do that in 3 stages. That's going to be really difficult because it's going to be hard to get on the backside of your headers with this stuff. On the fiberglass though, all we have to do is hit it once and forget it. So that's what we're going to do now. So like I mentioned, the paint is just going to stiffen up the surface of the fiberglass. It's also going to seal it, keep the grime out, moisture out, and dirt out. Alright, check that out. It looks pretty darn good, and it's ready to be installed. Nice and hard now. So, one of the mistakes I did make though was I bought black header wrap and black spray paint, causing me not to know where the spray paint was. So if I were you, I would do a little something different, maybe a tan or a white or a gray wrap with the black spray paint. Other than that, let's talk about the pros and the cons. So what are some of the pros? Well, the exhaust wrap keeps the temperature inside the exhaust system. What this is going to do is increase the horsepower, it increases performance, and it decreases your engine temperature and your engine bay temperature. It also is going to keep your engine bay cooler, so things are going to last longer in your engine bay, but it's also going to keep your intake cooler. Like, for example, this 4.0 motor, the intake is right next to the exhaust, so that heat is not transferring into the intake temperatures, and it's also not transferring to the fuel rail, which is right above this thing. So that's a plus. And then on some engines you might have spark plugs and spark plug wires and boots right next to the exhaust system. So that'll just keep all that heat from transferring. Increased horsepower, increased performance, and decreased temperatures all around. That said, what are some of the cons? Well, the cons are it's not easy to install. You pretty much have to take this off of the engine, which isn't easy. It also can trap moisture like water, which will make corrosion happen a lot faster. It can also trap oil and dirt, and oil can cause a fire hazard, which we've experienced in the past. If you have a leak in your system which leaks oil onto these headers and then you go and start the vehicle, it could catch on fire, so that's not good. So you need to be careful of that. Also, it's only temporary. It's not going to last forever, so maybe 3 to 5 years, maybe a little bit longer if you are careful. And the last con is that it's going to make your catalytic converter work just a little bit harder because of the increase in temperatures coming through the exhaust system. So just keep that in mind. Alright, I'm going to get back to putting this sucker on. If you have any questions about that process, leave them down in the comments below. Follow me on Instagram at BleepinJeep and check out these videos right here for more awesome content. We'll see you next time. Alright, that's a wrap. That's a wrap.